We're holding in the middle of the series about the Shlosha Asar Ikarei Emunah, the 13 principles of our faith, which the Rambam put together. They are the fundamentals of our faith. There are other concepts that are very important, but they pretty much encompass the fundamentals. We're holding today on the principle number 8, that I believe with perfect faith that the entire Torah that we now have is that which was given to Moshe Rabbeinu. In other words, a very important idea that Torah is min hashamayim. It wasn't made up by a human being. It wasn't put together by a committee like many people would like to believe. But it is divine in its origin. This is an important part of our emunah because without that, nothing really makes sense. Why should we take upon ourselves such mitzvot if it's not min hashamayim? After all, the United States Constitution and many other codes of law do change over time. There are amendments, there are changes made because they need to fit the generation. We've already discussed that this Torah cannot be changed. You cannot add, you cannot detract from it. The Torah says so clearly. The Torah anticipated that people will attempt to make changes, and that is why it warned us about that. So we've covered some important concepts and principles already about the uniqueness of Hashem, about creation, about God. We will be speaking about the Hashgacha of Hashem, how He interacts with the world. We'll be speaking about reincarnation, which touches on the principle of Sachar va'onesh, reward and punishment. In the coming weeks, we'll be talking about very fascinating fundamentals in Judaism that other nations believe in them too. But of course, we have first-hand information. It all goes back to what is written in the Torah or in the Kabbalah. Before we begin, I'd like to just give a brief introduction about emunah, just about emunah and the difficulty that people have. We live in a generation that people are having more and more of a difficulty understanding basics. For those who grew up with it, it's not so difficult because we grew up with it. But for those who did not have it, who didn't have a Jewish education, they were deprived of it. They grew up in a public school with kids of other backgrounds and religions. For them, it's definitely more difficult. It's just like learning a language. Up to the age of 10, all languages are alike. Chinese is not much more difficult than Spanish for an American speaker. For a child absorbs everything. The older you get, the more difficult it becomes to learn, to analyze, to retain the information. There's so many things going on in our mind at a later age that it just becomes more of a challenge. So there's no doubt that emunah, if it is able to be rooted in his earlier years, the better it is. Nevertheless, it's never too late. We know of people who have done teshuvah, who have come back and rekindled that spark of faith in themselves, even after many years, even though they didn't see it in their parents. The human being does have free will. He does have some sechel, hopefully some intelligence. And he has a neshama, which is the most important part of this whole formula. Neshama meaning he's endowed with a divine spirit. And that divine spirit is from Hashem. It is the antenna that allows a Jew and a non-Jew to be able to receive information, to be able to grasp certain concepts on his own, even though it was not given to him. We call it the subconscious mind. We have conscience. When we know, sometimes we just have a feeling something is not right. This is right, this is wrong. There's no religion, there's no code of ethics, code of laws telling us. We just feel like it. We don't think it's right or it's wrong. That's coming from the neshama. The physical body, the human flesh, does not distinguish between right and wrong. On the contrary, the human flesh is not very, very objective, it's subjective. It likes certain things. It is biased. It is inclined towards that which benefits it. It doesn't want to feel pain. It enjoys certain things. It likes to have pleasure. That's the flesh. That's the basar v'dam. That's the guf, the body. But the neshama is pure. The problem is the neshama is caged into the physical body, and there is continuous struggles between what the neshama would like to say and express and between what the guf, the physical body, is interested in. So the idea behind the whole series that we're doing here is really chizuk ha'emunah. Even for those who have emunah, we continuously need chizukim, strengthening. One's emunah can chas v'shalom, God forbid, be shattered if he had to go through a Holocaust, which is a very powerful storm. And if one's roots of education are very shallow, not strong, they cannot withstand so easily the winds, the powerful storms of a Holocaust. So people's emunah has been shaken, at the very least has been shaken by all kinds of things that happen in their life. And you can imagine, the many terrible tragedies of all sorts that have happened to our people as a whole, to Am Yisrael, and nevertheless, Baruch Hashem, many people have been able to weather the storms, and even till this very day, they're Jewish, they're observant despite it all. The ones who are, however, at a big disadvantage are those who didn't get it from their parents or grandparents. Those who have been detached, or growing up in places where there was no real Jewish community. They are somewhat at a disadvantage. And through the Ikarei HaEmunah, what are we trying to do? Ikarei HaEmunah, the fundamentals, the principles of the faith, we're trying to rebuild, to build up block by block. They can be called building blocks of Emunah. You cannot say, I believe this and I do not believe the others. Then you don't have a building. You have to build the whole thing from scratch, from the very beginning, from the foundation. If you miss any of the blocks of this building of Emunah, then it will not be very, very strong. And it can easily fall apart. So in learning about the Ikarei HaEmunah, we rebuild. We rebuild, even to those of us who know and agree with this, we rebuild it, we strengthen it. We cement it again in our minds and heart. And this will give us strength. It will give us strength to deal with all kinds of problems and issues in life. Right? The more one has clarity about the principles of Emunah, the easier it is for him to handle all kinds of situations. Imagine somebody who by nature is sad, depressed. By nature. Nothing, he's just that type. He's moody. It happens. People, easily break. They're very emotional. They're sensitive. Somebody makes fun of them. Somebody insults them. How do you deal with that? Some people don't know how to deal with it. They break down. There's all kinds of situations. Financial losses. How do you deal with it? How do you deal with all kinds of situations that are sudden, that are hard, painful? Unless one's emunah is strong, it is difficult. Therefore, these building blocks, I have no doubt, can help a great deal in understanding many of the questions that arise from time to time that we may not have an immediate answer. But having the building blocks does not allow us to fall apart. Allows us to continue living our life as devoted Jews despite what we may have just experienced. Why there's so many people that when they learn about these topics have a hard time? Why do they have such a hard time with it? It makes sense to many of us, but it doesn't, for some reason, come across so easily to others. They have a hard time with it. Is it really because they have good arguments? It's not the arguments. Many, many times what is happening psychologically with people is that human nature essentially is opposed to anything which is very, very different than what he's used to. People don't like change, especially drastic change. Especially we're talking about an hashkafat olam, a view of life, a view of the world, our perspective of things. If I'm being introduced to something radically different that also means that I may have to change my life, I'm not going to necessarily buy it so easily. Right? It's not something that I would be willing to so easily buy into if it means a tremendous change in my life. There's a saying in the Gemara, Avda behefkeruta nihale. A slave likes his way of life. What's the way of life of a slave? It's not so comfortable. He works for someone else. He has a master. But being a slave means that he's not obligated with all the mitzvot of the Torah. There's a certain degree of freedom, of spirituality that a slave has. He can marry just almost anyone he wants. He can live a life of hefkerut. Hefkerut means that he has no real obligations except to his immediate master. He's an Eved. And Avadim sometimes like it the way they are, because it allows them to do certain things that they would not be able to do if they were truly free men. The best, easiest example that I can think of that we can relate to is somebody who likes it in prison. An American prison, not a Persian, Iranian prison. Right? American prison. Why? Okay, all right. Thanks. Sorry. What goes on in many of the prisons, especially if you have a private cell? You know, like in hospitals, sometimes you have to share a room. Sometimes you have a private room. Well, some prisoners have a private room. Some. But anyway, there's showers, there's food, they have a gym, they have a TV. I even heard there's libraries. It could be, depending on where you're stuck, depending on the jail. For somebody who does not own a home, his bills are taken care of. He has no headaches. Think about it just for a moment. I mean, obviously we don't want to be in a prison because we have other plans. We have a family, we want to enjoy life. But a person who does not really have a life, he's an Eved anyway. He enjoys the easy life. It's not easy. And it's not easy for those who don't have religion either. They still have to pay bills. All right? We all have a similar lifestyle in some ways. We all need to eat. We all need to survive. We need to have shelter. So for no one it's easy, completely easy. No. Even if you have money, you have worries, different kinds of worries. So the rabbis are telling us a very important idea here. Avda behefkerut anihale, human beings would prefer a life of hefkerut if you would offer them that opportunity of being able to do anything they want, anything they wish, without any commitments, real commitments, no guilty conscience. That's an easier lifestyle. Yes.
I thought that a slave, is required to be treated with.
That's a Jewish slave. Oh. That's a Hebrew Jewish slave. I'm not talking about that. So that's a good question. I did not say what I say entirely about an Eved Ivri, even though some of it is true even regarding an Eved Ivri. Because an Eved Ivri also is allowed to marry a Shifcha Knaanit, a non-Jewish maid. It's part of his, while he is a slave. So some of it applies to him too, but I did not necessarily mean an Eved Ivri. I meant an Eved in general, where he totally belongs to his master. And in some ways he doesn't mind, because he has a very easy lifestyle when it comes to religion. He doesn't have the same commitments as a Ben Chorin, as a free man. But it could apply to an Eved Ivri as well, because so long as he's an Eved Ivri, he can marry a Shifcha Knaanit. Once he's not an Eved Ivri, he does not have that permission. He has to marry a Jewish woman. So anyway, an Eved has an easy, in some ways he has it easy that he can believe whatever he wants to believe. Nobody's going to come after him. He has another master. This master is a human being. Therefore, because of this, what is happening is when people begin to hear about Torah, begin to hear about Emunah, begin to hear and see a structure and a discipline that the Torah offers, they begin to, or part of their reaction sometimes is a litnageach. Litnageach means to fight you, to argue with you. That's their immediate reaction. Who says so? I can prove you wrong. I can show you that it's not true. That's an immediate reaction that you will find in all debates, where the individual who's debating you, who's against you, opposing you, is not eager to know the truth. So he's coming from a totally argumentative kind of attitude. Argumentative, but not necessarily inclined to hear what you have to say. One who really wants to hear what you have to say, one who wants to absorb information which may be radically new to him, has to have the willingness to accept, to receive. Not everybody has that attitude, that approach. yes, I want to receive, I want to accept, I want to hear something that maybe is helpful to me, something that is healthy, something that is pure, something that is true. Not everybody is coming from that kind of a direction, because they realize, some of the time at least, they realize that this is very much obligating them. If they accept this as the truth, it means that their lifestyle has to change. People are comfortable the way they are. People don't like to change. So we're talking about psychology here. There's a lot of psychology in people that does not allow them to accept what we tell them, even though it's so true. Just analyze it, do your best to figure out if you need proof. There's additional proof. They won't even get through 10% of all the proof that you have if there's no real interest. So what's necessary is real interest, and that does not exist so much today. We live in a very materialistic world. And because of materialism, people have become comfortable, and this is going to take away some of their comfort. So they may argue with you very, very much. Some are not so argumentative, but some are very argumentative. So if it's in their nature to oppose and to not believe and to be skeptic, it's going to be even more difficult for them to entertain any idea that is so radical, so different than what they're used to. Then we have a separate problem. We have a problem in this generation, and really it is also true about other periods in our history too. You have several individuals who are going to have a hard time receiving any proof about emunah. There are some who have, I call them in Hebrew, Yeshlem atimut sichlit. They have a mental block. It's a problem. They have a mental block. They can't really digest all that information properly and figure out what to do with it. Then you have those who are taking morphine. Morphine. You know what morphine is? Anybody here know what morphine is?
Morphine or morphine?
Is it morphine?
Yeah. Morphine. Kills the pain?
Yeah?
Morphine.
So it's not morphine. What's morphine?
I don't know.
Okay. Maybe I'm confusing it with something else.
Opium.
Maybe I'm confusing opium and I'm combining the two. That must be it. Because they both have something in common. You know what they have in common? No, that's what it is. I thought about the two. What they have in common is that they're painkillers. Even though opium is not intended as a painkiller, but it does.
It does the job.
It does the job. How do you know?
Just kidding. So I have heard.
Yeah. But anyway, morphine is taken from a plant. And what does it do? It really dulls the senses. It dulls the senses, so if you're in tremendous pain, they actually give it to you in the hospitals, small doses, because otherwise there's some pain that is very, very difficult to bear. Very difficult pain. Imagine somebody having kidney stones. I hear that it's more painful than giving birth. It's very difficult, excruciating pain. So anyway, so there are people who need morphine. So the reason I use that example is because in life, there are people that have this kind of a behavior. It is as though they have taken morphine and they don't feel anything you tell them. It doesn't affect them. You say words that are very beautiful, that make a lot of sense. Doesn't impress them at all. Somehow their minds have become numb. Their senses have become numb. Their hearts have become numb. They don't really feel anything. You know, there are people who've gone through so much pain that they're actually numb. And they've become indifferent. People go through traumas. People go through all kinds of situations. And life can do that to you. But sometimes people do it to themselves. They just don't care. They have this don't care attitude. So I call them, they're like taking morphine. In other words, that even if you show them something, okay, that's very nice, it's cute. You know, they won't oppose you. They'll just gloss over it. And what else? What you are impressed by, they are not. How could that be? Because they're taking morphine. In other words, not real morphine, but it could be that their lifestyle, it could be that they're pinukim, they're being spoiled by all kinds of pleasures that they have. It just doesn't talk to them. These people need a big shocker to wake them up. Yeah, some people need something to really wake them up, to allow them to, otherwise, oh, that's so nice.
But to what extent could it be genetic? So that's how they were born?
No, they're not genetic. We're talking about people who can be impressed. But because of the lifestyle that they're leading, not so much their personality, it's just a lifestyle. They don't really have an interest in this. They need a big thing, they need something to shock them. You know, like somebody whose heart has stopped, sometimes you have to apply some electricity. Boom, they put them on you, and you get their heart going. So sometimes people, that's what they need. Otherwise, they're... And I'll mention soon why that is. I mean, there's various reasons of why people have this kind of morphine type of attitude. And then you have the very, very common one, unfortunately, is the one who's asleep. If anybody here would be asleep, you wouldn't be hearing me. And I hope I don't make you fall asleep. But anybody who's asleep usually does not hear. There are people who are very, very light sleepers. As soon as you open the door into the bedroom, you know, they've been asleep for 2-3 hours. They just light sleepers. But anyway, people who are asleep usually cannot understand what you're saying to them. So there are a lot of people who are asleep. So what's going on? What's going on in the 21st century, in our time, is many people either are taking morphine or are asleep, which means they don't have the time to think. They don't have the time. There's nothing that's making them stop to think. They're asleep. What do you mean by asleep? They're just doing so many things other than trying to stop and think from, wait a minute, why am I alive? What's life all about? They don't ask these questions. There are some who were bothered by these kind of questions, and as soon as they finished the Israeli army, they went to India to search for answers. They went to some monastery. They went to some guru. They went to meditate in the Himalayas. Yeah, because they're searching for answers. That's normal. That's typical. The neshama is thirsty. They didn't get it at home, and all of a sudden on their own, there's something pushing them. Well, that's, in some ways, it's good. You just want to make sure you go to the right person, right? Not just to anybody. Yeah.
I thought, though, that in Israel, people have a sense of Hashem that everybody, that people just don't practice because they don't want to, but that they believe it, they know the Torah.
I don't understand. What do you mean?
You're saying how people in Israel go to India for answers.
Some individuals, young individuals who have just finished with the army, that is one of the things they embark on. They take a trip to America, South America, or one of the more popular destinations, East Asia, right? India, Tibet, Nepal, right? You find a lot of Israelis there. So anyway, they're searching, which leads us to the next point. That's good, because it's ha'emet tzarich lechapes. Emet, truth, you have to search. It doesn't come to you. You have to search it. You want emet, you have to search for it. It won't come to you. Now, obviously, in seminars and places where the emet is presented, people have taken the time, have made the decision to attend and to hear with an open mind, and then in a number of days they may be able to get a glimpse of the emet. It still will take time for them to digest everything, to absorb the information, depending on their age and depending on their willingness, of course, that we mentioned earlier. Then they may make a decision to change their way of thinking, their way of life, or both. So what's the problem today? The problem today is that people have a lack of time. So you have to force yourself to make time. You know, when it comes to certain things, you have to take the time. Unfortunately, even though this is not the topic of tonight, marriage is one of those victims of lack of time. Some people don't take it seriously enough, and they just push it off indefinitely because they have to pass the bar. They have to become a surgeon. You know, to become a surgeon, it takes several years, more than 4 years in college. Whoever said you can't get married while you're going to school? Right? You think if you go to school, she's going to wait for you? What if you grow bald and fat by that time? You know, who's going to take you by then? You know, you have to look at your father, your parents. You see what kind of genes you carry. You know, maybe you don't know, right? You can't push it off. We got to take the time for those things that are priorities in our life. For a Jewish man, learning Torah is a priority. Even if it's 5-10 minutes every morning or every evening, it's a priority. How many people are willing to skip breakfast or dinner? Very few. If they're in a very strict diet, perhaps. We don't want to skip these things. They're important to us. It's the fuel for the body. We get headaches if we don't have caffeine. For those of you who are used to it, you get headaches if you haven't had your cup of coffee. I know I need mine every day, sometimes 2 or 3, depending how many hours of sleep I had that night. That's what it usually depends on. But if you're used to something, you don't give it up so easily. But not too many Jews are used to this kind of lifestyle, so they don't take the time to think, why should I make the change? So therefore, when it comes to principles of our faith, if we begin to understand each one, and then we look at them all together, we realize that if people, in general Jews, were really, really to believe strongly in every one of these principles, right, they would have less doubts. They would have less issues. They would have less problems with those who they associate with those who they live with, goyim. How do you deal with anti-Semitism? This is a quick example. Well, if you understand the 13 principles well, you've learned the Torah, you look at anti-Semitism very clearly, very simple. This is a hand of God. And you say to yourself, well, this is the hand of Hashem. Perhaps I did something wrong. Otherwise, why should everybody bother me? Everybody, it was most of the goyim. The fact that one neighbor is upset, maybe he's jealous. Maybe I did something to him. Okay, but if everybody's upset, if everybody's against me, if everybody is willing, is opposed to my way of life, they want me to assimilate to them, they're trying to kill me and persecute me. I mean, what's wrong? Why is everybody against Israel? Why can't Israel make peace with the Arabs? They have a big dilemma. If you follow Israeli politics today, everybody's really doesn't know how to get out of this problem. No matter how you cut it, you're in trouble. If you share the land with the Palestinians, that means you give them equal rights. They're going to outnumber you, maybe, one of these days, and you're going to have an Arab prime minister. So you can give them equal rights. Well, if you can't give them equal rights, they won't accept it. In other words, to share the country. That's beautiful. Share the country. In this country, even a black person can become president. That's what they proved right now. I mean, a lot of people are disappointed, right? But at least it shows something. But in Israel, you can't do that. If it's a Jewish state, but it's not a Jewish state in so many people's eyes, unfortunately, they want to call it a democracy. Well, it's not a true democracy if you cannot have the Arab people as equal citizens. That's not a democracy. So what do? Well, there are the possibilities, 2 states. Right? Well, that's what they're trying to do right now. 2 states. 2 states? Oh no, we can't do 2 states. There's not enough room. Especially with their demands of bringing back everybody who left, or was kicked out, or left on their own, or whatever. There's no room for everybody. So you see what I mean? So 2 states, who's going to want 2 states? And they want Jerusalem to be their capital too. So it's a big problem. Right? The only solution is that this has to be a Jewish state. Israel is a Jewish state, a Jewish land. Other citizens are welcome to stay if they keep the 7 Noachide laws. We have no problem with that. It's called the Ger Toshav. But they don't have the right to vote. Because they can't be prime ministers. They can't be kings. They can't decide about Jewish issues because they're not Jewish. Oh, no, it can't be a Jewish state. You see? So this is what's going on right now. This is what's in the headlines right now. And not everybody looks at it properly if they don't have a very, very strong emunah. So before we begin just to analyze this principle, I just want to tell you just another quick small introduction that the Torah, tonight we were speaking about how the Torah is min hashamayim. Moshe didn't make it up. This Torah is something very difficult to sell to people. If this were man-made, Moshe would never have succeeded in selling this meaning offering this, convincing people to buy it. Impossible. It's just impossible. With stubborn people like the Jews. So the Torah is not an easy sell if this was man-made. And I'm going to go through some of the examples of how it's not an easy sell. Besides the fact that the way the Torah is written, you saw, you witnessed, you were part of it, you experienced it. I was. If Moshe is selling this to the first generation, I mean the first people, they would have thought, what are you talking about? I was never there, I never saw this. The way everything is written in Torah is clear that the first generation, at least, was there, was present. So how could you do something like that? How could you write something like that if it's not true? It must have been true. We celebrate the holidays. Well, when did they begin? Shavuot began in Matan Torah. Pesach began in Yetziat Mitzrayim. It didn't begin 100 years ago. It didn't begin 300 years. It had to begin at some point. Right? Otherwise, why am I celebrating it? In other words, I'm celebrating because I left Egypt. I left Egypt? Who said so? Well, your father told you so, and his father told you so. It has to be like that, otherwise why should people believe in it? So the way it is written, the way the Torah explains and justifies everything, is convincing only because somebody was there. Somebody was there to accept it. Somebody was there that experienced it. And because of that, they went along with it. Remember, there's also tremendous commitment to 613 commandments. If I believe this, that means I have to fulfill so many commandments. Who would want to do that? Unless he believes it's true. Right? Unless he knows for a fact that this is the truth. Otherwise, 613 commandments, some of them are very difficult. You want to do a Brit Milah on your boy? That's painful. Why do that? Why do a Brit Milah? Just for the fun of it? No, God said so. Why? It's painful. There's all kinds of mitzvot that are not so easy. Why do it? Yom Kippur, fast for over 24 hours, Day of Atonement. Who says I need an atonement? Nevertheless, what do you see? We see, time over time, generation after generation, a great deal of Am Yisrael, maybe not every single one, but a great deal of Am Yisrael willing to commit themselves, and even if it involves self-sacrifice, even if it involves dying for what you believe in. So that says something. The reason why they were willing to die for it is very simple. Because our emunah is not blind faith, it's based on knowledge. We actually know for a fact that this is true. We've seen it, we've experienced it. A father does not lie to his son. And this is over and over and over throughout the whole history, whether you come from Iran, or whether you come from Russia, or whether you come from South America, we all have the same Torah. We have some differences in our traditions, rabbinic traditions and the like, customs, but the Torah is the same Torah. The Shema Yisrael is the same Shema Yisrael. We believe pretty much in the exact same thing. Despite the long diaspora, despite the distance between all the communities, it has remained the same. And that's what the Torah says. Look back. You won't find this in any other nation, culture, or civilization, where people witness what you witnessed, where people saw firsthand what you saw. Look around, read throughout the history books. Any history book you want, nobody makes your claim, not even the Mormons. What do they all do? They rely on one individual, and who claims he spoke to God, of course. He had a vision, a prophet, or whatever. Why believe him? There's no reason to believe him. But we, all of us were there. The Neshamot were there. Our forefathers were there. They heard it. So that revelation needed to be that way, so that we should not contest in any way that it's not true. So this 8th principle, that the Torah is min hashamayim, whoever does not believe in this is called a kofer and does not have a chelek l'olam haba. There are certain ideas that it doesn't say that whoever does not believe in ein lo chelek l'olam haba. Who doesn't have a share. This one, anybody who says Moshe wrote it, not Hashem, and he's Jewish and he keeps Shabbat and everything, still ein lo chelek l'olam haba. That's how serious this is. You cannot say that. It's obvious, as we will see, that it's min hashamayim. Now, when we say that this Torah Moshe did not write, this Torah is min hashamayim, what are we talking about? Which Torah? We're talking about all the parts, all the portions of the Torah. The stories of it, the vowels, the details of the mitzvot, all of that is min hashamayim. He did not make up anything. Yes?
If indeed, however, the Jew is just not convinced that they're a secular Jew, they were not brought up with that, would they indeed still lose their share in Olam Haba?
No, because as long as he tries his best to figure something out, as long as he does not do anything intentionally against the Torah, if he simply is not to blame for his lack of knowledge, he may come back in a reincarnation, where he will be educated and raised in the proper way. So it all depends who you're talking about. If you're talking about an individual who knows and still lets go of everything, he's in trouble. He may be in trouble. One who does not, who never knew and has to figure it out on his own and never had the time to stop and think, he's not to blame completely. But he still doesn't have a ticket to Olam Haba right away. He still has to come back and complete his mission. You don't go to Gehenom necessarily to cleanse yourself of all kinds of sins that you were not, that you were innocent of. Perhaps you didn't know, but you still do not have a ticket either for Gan Eden, immediate Olam Haba. Yes.
Well, the status of a captured child. That's what. So most people today fall into the category
of a kidnapped child. Tinok shenishba. Yeah, a lot of kids are considered that, as though they were kidnapped by the Gentiles, meaning that they were brainwashed through the culture of the non-Jewish world, and they never really had the time to think about it. Upstairs, of course, they know the exact truth. They will know, wait a minute, but you did have a chance to attend a class. Why didn't you? You knew you were Jewish. So that may be a problem, because you may have resisted for a reason that you shouldn't have. But if a person really does not know, they'll give him a second chance. Next time around, you'll be born in Bnei Brak or in Me'ah She'arim, right? And you will have it. You will have all of what you've missed and more. Yeah. So all the details of the Torah is min hashamayim. And that's what the pasuk in the Torah says. There are several pasukim that emphasize this point. Atem reitem ki min hashamayim dibarti. You saw, you heard, you experienced that I spoke to you min hashamayim. Because they did. At least the first two commandments, they heard the voice of Hashem. Another pasuk, Ish'alna leyamim rishonim. Moshe asks the Am Yisrael, in the name of Hashem, of course, go back and ask anybody you want. Has there ever been like this? Ever been such a ma'amad, an experience where somebody heard the word of God that they can testify? In other words, look around, you will not see anything of this like. Yeshayahu also says, Atem eidai ne'um Hashem. You are my witnesses. In other words, that the Torah is based on testimony. We were there. The first generation actually saw, experienced, and that is why they committed themselves. They said, Na'aseh v'nishma. They would not have done so had they not heard or seen. Remember, these are very stubborn people. Jews are still stubborn. They haven't changed. Very stubborn people. You mean the Jews accepted such a complex set of laws? Complex. Numerous laws. They accepted of all people? Yeah. That says something. Moshe also says that Bezot Ted'un, that Hashem has sent me. When you come to Har Sinai, you will see proof of it. In other words, He's telling them in Egypt the time has come to leave. He's telling them that we're leaving. He's telling them where we're going. They're not convinced 100% yet. So that's why he reminds them, Bezot Ted'un, they are told that Ma'amad Har Sinai will be the ultimate proof. And Hashem pretty much said that to Moshe too. Hashem says that to Moshe. Moshe tells Am Yisrael, this will be the most convincing proof of all. That you yourself will hear it. Not from me, but from Hashem. Torah is also very, very makpid, very strict about that. We should not forget these things. So we have many reminders. Do you know that the mezuzah is one reminder? Mezuzah that we have on certain doors, certain entrances. There are many reminders. Don't forget about this. Words that are written in the mezuzah and the tefillin are to remind us where we came from, where we come from. Who are we? What's our mission? That Hashem Hu Elokim. All of this is in the mezuzah. All of this is a constant reminder. One of the greatest, however, and most fascinating proofs that the Torah is min hashamayim is the incredible amount of chokhmah, the incredible amount of wisdom that the Torah possesses, that it is impossible, just about impossible for any human being to have put together this Torah without having divine knowledge. One of the examples that is used is kashrut. When you go through Parshat Shemini and you read and learn about which animals are kosher or not, what do you find? You find that what makes an animal kosher is if it has two things: split hoofs and it chews its cud, right? However, Moshe Rabbeinu says there are several exceptions. Either you have the two or you have none. There are several animals, however, that have one and not the other. 3 of them that he quotes. Actually, I'm sorry, 4. 3 of them, 3 of the 4 have split hoofs, have chew their cud but don't have split hoofs. And 1 of the 4, the pig, has split hoofs and doesn't chew its cud. So you have 4 exceptions, 4 animals in the entire world. That is what is apparent from the words of the Torah. The Torah is very, very clear that there are 4, however, that only have 1 and don't have the other. In other words, either you have the 2 and you're kosher, or you have none and you're not kosher. Then you have 4 animals that have 1 and not the other. The 3 that have 1 that they chew their cud is the camel, the rabbit or the hare, and some say the 3rd one is the rock badger or the coney. It's similar to the rabbit. And the 4th one, as we said, was the pig that has the split hoofs and doesn't chew the cud. So the Gemara points to this. The rabbis were smart, right? The rabbis were not just ordinary people; they were knowledgeable. They look at this. Moshe Rabbeinu was not a zoologist. He did not travel all over the world. He's taking a risk over here. He's taking a risk that one of these days some scientists are going to find the 5th animal. They're going to say, "You see, the Torah says there are only 4. Here's the 5th animal." And they tried. The British scientists at the turn of the 20th century, the end of 19th, 20th century, they went out searching for a 5th animal and they thought they found one. The animal is called the babirusa in Indonesia. Split hoofs, doesn't chew its cud. Here's another animal. Until, of course, they realized their mistake, that animal is in the pig family. So it doesn't count. Yes?
How about the giraffe?
Giraffe is a kosher animal.
But we don't eat it.
Because it's $1,000 a pound.
No,
Giraffe, yeah. You want to eat giraffe? No, the giraffe is the easiest animal to slaughter. You can't miss. The neck is so big, no matter where you cut it, you're going to do a good job. But you need a ladder. You need a ladder. You need to catch it. And it's expensive. And they won't let you slaughter it. Unless you go to Kenya, there are some restaurants in Kenya, Nairobi, that you can have zebra meat, crocodile meat, lion meat, if you're not Jewish, of course, where you can have exotic meats. But there's not that many giraffes that they're going to slaughter. And if they do once in a while, it's going to be expensive. And you don't have giraffes here. You have giraffes only in certain locations in Africa. So it's not an animal, even though the Torah mentions it, according to some opinions. The Torah doesn't mention it. Some say it's called the zamer in Parshat Re'eh, in Sefer Devarim. But it's not, there's no doubt that it's a kosher animal. There are many animals out there that are kosher because they have split hoofs and chew their cud. Right? They're in the deer family, or in the ram family, right? All kinds, different kinds. Big bulls, smaller bulls, steer, Indian buffaloes, bison. They're all, pretty much similar. And they all have the 2 simanim. With birds, however, the rabbis tell us we need to have, on top of the signs of the kosher bird, you also have to have a tradition that the bird was eaten. With birds, you need a masoret. The reason why with birds you need a masoret, it's not enough that you know the signs. Anybody here know the signs of a kosher bird? The Torah doesn't tell us. It's in the Torah Sheba'al Peh.
I know that.
It can't be a bird of prey. But what does it have to have? Besides, the no's are easy. The no is no bird of prey. But it has to have a 4th finger. It has to have a finger, that is facing the back. It's called etzba yetera. besides the toes that are facing the front, you will notice, look at the chicken, that there's one towards the back. That's called etzba yetera. It has to have a zefek. A zefek is the crop, C-R-O-P, that the bird has. It's like a storage where the food goes in temporarily, where it's kept inside. And it has to have a kurkevan niklaf. It has to have the gizzard. You know what the gizzards are? It's a kind of an intestine, the stomach, muscles. People you have it in soup sometimes. In English, it's called gizzards. I forgot. Remember how you call it in Farsi? I forgot. There's a word for it.
Scandil?
Huh?
Scandil? No.
No. Yeah.
Book.
The pupik is in Yiddish. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Anyway, and the outside skin has to be, you need to be able to peel it off. Anyway, so what happens is these are the simanim, the basic simanim. There are other simanim, like you said, it's not a bird of prey. There are other ways to tell. The problem is because it's difficult. You see a bird. Well, can I check you out? How are you going to check her out? I mean, it's inside the simanim, So they tell you one way to know is tell me who your friends and I'll tell you who you are. See who the bird befriends. If it befriends ravens and eagles, the non-clean birds, she's unclean too. But anyway, because it's complex, it's not so easy to determine if it's a kosher bird or not always. The rabbis tell us you need a Masorete tradition. Have Jewish people eaten it in the past? Like with turkey. Americans came to this country, they saw turkey. What's this? We never saw this. Can we eat it? Well, there were other communities in the world that ate turkey. And that is why we can eat turkey. Not on Thanksgiving necessarily, but anytime you want, stuffed turkey. Yeah. So anyway, so kashrut is a sign. Simanim Hashamayim, Moshe Rabbeinu could not have known of these four. Now, for those of you who are a little bit more into it, you may have a question about the kani or about the rabbit. They don't appear to be eating their cud, chewing their cud. With a camel, I've seen it. Just look at it. But what about these two animals? You will find that the method of recycling the food, because what does chew the cud really mean? Chew the cud means that the animal does not have all sets of teeth up and down in both jaws, right? Look at the cow, you will see only teeth in the bottom, not teeth on top. The front set of teeth. And that's why it cannot bite, and that's why it cannot chew well on its food. It goes down, it comes back up. After it's mixed with chemicals, saliva, then it's easier for it to be digested. So there's several stomachs through which it travels, and that's what chewing the cud is. But with two other animals, the hare, the kani, they have a similar system, but it doesn't exactly happen in the same way. The food is not regurgitated through the front, it comes out through the back. As excrement, in a sense, but in pellets. And guess what happens to those pellets? She takes it and eats it again.
Ew.
It's not smelly. Yeah. It's okay. Not for you, but for it. Right. So anyway, so we know that there are only four that have these two that have one siman and not the other. What about fish? What makes a fish kosher? Scales and fins. So the rabbis asked a question that we know for a fact that all fish that have scales have fins. Not all fish that have fins have scales. So why not just say scales? Why does the Torah say snapir vekaskeset, both fins and scales? So Gemara says like dil Torah ledira. It's to impress upon us the great knowledge that the Torah had of this exact detail, this exact point, that whichever fish does have scales also has fins. It's a detail that you wouldn't know that. Now there are some fish that as soon as you grab them, you take them out of the water, they lose their scales, like mackerel. So even though it's a kosher fish, you must say, well, where are the scales? As soon as you take them out of the water, it drops its scales. There are fish like that, so that you may not know that. But anyway, these are the simanim of kosher fish. So again, this is all kinds of knowledge that the Torah has, that Moshe Rabbeinu could not have known these things back then unless he was told so. One of the more incredible ones, however, is mitzvah shemitah. It's economic suicide not to work for an entire year, the 7th sabbatical year, not to work. Hashem says, no problem. I will give you blessing, and the 6th year you will have for 3 years, the 6th, the 7th, and a portion of the 8th. Who can make such a promise? Can you make such a promise? Don't work for the entire year. I give you a promise, and on the 6th year of the cycle of Shemitah, you have triple, a bumper crop. And it happened. If it did not happen in the beginning, they would have said, forget it, this is not for me. Later on, of course, unfortunately, because Am Yisrael did not keep the Shemitah, not only did they not have blessings, they didn't have rain, they had all kinds of trouble. When Am Yisrael does not follow the Torah Mitzvot, it says very clear what will happen. You follow my statutes, you will have it good. If not, you won't have it good. You'll have war, you'll have famine, you'll have trouble. They don't understand where all this trouble is coming from because they don't learn. So the Shemitah, the Mitzvah of Shemitah is powerful, powerful proof that this is not words that Moshe is saying, this is coming from Shamayim. Same thing with Mitzvah Aliyah LaRegel. You go up to the Regel, 3 times a year the men are commanded to go to Yerushalayim, right? Appear in front of me, appear with me in the Bet HaMikdash, Hashem says. I want to see you 3 times a year. You're all the way stuck in Tzfat. I want to see you. Come, see the Bet HaMikdash. Come 3 times a year. The Arab, the enemy, says, perfect. I'm going to take advantage. When all the men are away, that's when we're going to invade the country. By the way, that's what the Egyptians thought of in Yom Kippur War. Best time to attack. They didn't realize that it's not so good for them, because that was the best time in some ways for Am Yisrael too, because they were all in the Bet HaKnesset. It's easy to reach everybody. So all the soldiers were notified immediately. We had other troubles in Yom Kippur War, other troubles that has nothing to do with the fact that it was a holiday, right? And it was all in Hashamayim, the way the war was conducted. Nevertheless, this is an idea that the Torah says may happen. Maybe you may think. In other words, it may happen means the potential is there, but it will never happen. Never did it happen in Jewish history that when Am Yisrael went Aliyah LaRegel to the Bet HaMikdash, was there any enemy attacking? The best time to invade. No, Hashem makes a promise. Who can make such a promise? Only Hashem. Moshe writes this on his own? No, it's Min HaShamayim. Torah speaks about unnatural forms of anti-Semitism, antisemiyut lo regilah. You will be persecuted. You will be taken prisoners. You will be exiled from your land. They will hate your guts. The Torah is also predicting the future, predicting a very, very unnatural form of anti-Semitism. Which other nation is not liked, despised so much like the Jews? What do they talk the most about in the United Nations, if not about Israel? This is all said. This is all in the Torah. Another one is mitzvat sotah. A woman suspected of having cheated on her husband, a married woman. Husband does not know. If it's true, he can't live with her. He can't remain married to her. They have to get divorced. She denies it, of course, but there is some witnesses. There's some evidence. We don't know for sure. So the Torah says, no problem. We have a polygraph machine. The best one. Let her drink this formula, right? That the Kohen will give her to drink. And if it's true that she committed this terrible avon, this terrible sin, she's going to die on the spot. She's going to swell up, right? And pretty much die in front of everybody. So you can see, wow, this must have worked. Whenever it did happen and whenever there was problems, I mean, you saw clearly Torah Min HaShamayim. How could Moshe make such a promise? So Sotah, in some ways, whenever it was an issue, was able to demonstrate that this is true. One of the greatest proofs, however, is the eternity of the Torah and the eternity of Am Yisrael. The Torah will always be around, Am Yisrael will always be around, and this even the Goyim are amazed. Like Mark Twain and others who have, some Goyim do take the time to think. They're thinkers. They have an open mind, and even though they're not Jewish, they're amazed. So they don't have the answer, how come the Jewish people survive when everybody else is gone? But at least they point to this fact That the Torah basically said this is exactly what will happen. No matter what happens to you, you will always be around. The Torah will always be around, the Jewish people will always be around. There will always be at least a number of Jews who will observe the Torah mitzvot. So the fact that the Torah is telling us this in advance is basically saying, that Hashem who created the world, Hashem who created us, knows for a fact that He will always enable us to survive regardless of the odds, regardless of the problems. Then you have, for those who like archaeology, we do have archaeological evidence that points that everything that the Torah writes is true. There was somebody called the Yosef, we just read about in the Parashiot. It did exist. Am Yisrael was in Egypt. They can't figure out 100% how the Jews got to Israel, millions of them, but more or less they know. There's all kinds of proof that they came to Israel, they settled in Israel. There was a Yeshua, there was a David HaMelech, Shlomo HaMelech, there was Bet HaMikdash, even though the Arabs and many wouldn't like you to believe that it's not true, there's just too much evidence. So there's evidence, archaeological evidence as well, from the scrolls that they found in the caves of Qumran, all kinds of evidence that they find everywhere, whether it's Masada or anywhere. They found tefillin there, they found mikvaot there. You find exact Jewish lifestyle back then as we have today, even though it was more primitive. And then one of the more recent finds and discoveries is the codes, some interesting codes in the Torah. We always knew that there are codes embedded in the Torah. All kinds of codes. There's Gematria, there's Rashi Tevot, Sofet Tevot, all kinds of codes in the text of the Torah. The Torah is divine. If it's a divine book, Hashem can put codes. And He did put codes. We do not know all the codes. We do not necessarily know how to figure all the codes. But some people do claim that some codes can be figured out through computers, through all kinds of skips, letters that form words, all kinds of ways. There's more than one way. Because we're not very familiar with the system, we may not always be accurate. Because it has to, in order for it to be a true code, you really have to be able to prove it that it's not just happens to be there by chance, because there are codes that can be there by chance. But we do know that some of the codes are real, and some of these codes are incredible, they're fascinating, and they may serve as additional proof, not proof by itself, but as additional proof to reinforce those who have any doubts about the veracity of the Torah and about how the Torah is divine. It could not have been written by a human being. Otherwise, how could he put codes? Yes?
Aren't there codes in the Torah that prophesy 9/11?
There may be. There may be all kinds of codes, but we're not 100% sure which code is a real code. That's why, it's hard to say if somebody finds a code, this is for sure a code. Statistically, it may be very weak. And if it's weak, then it may not necessarily be a code. So we don't have an exact tradition of how to search for all the codes, and that's why it makes it more difficult. But there's no doubt whatsoever that some codes and some of the codes that they have found are real. Then we go into a little bit about Torah Shebal Peh. We spoke a little bit about the Torah, but that's the written Torah. What about the oral Torah? The oral Torah, maybe that was made up, Chas v'Shalom. Even though we have rabbinic edicts, we have things that are midrabanan, but for the most part, things that are Torah Shebal Peh are not by rabbinic origin. They've received it orally. It was transmitted to them orally. And there has to be such a thing as Torah Shebal Peh. How do we know there has to be a Torah Shebal Peh? Torah tells you to put on tefillin. Tefillin? What is that? How do you make tefillin? What do you put inside? How do I know it's square, it's black, with straps? All these details of tefillin. How do you make a mezuzah? What do you put in the mezuzah? Tzitzit. Who has to put on tzitzit? Can it have shatnez? Wool and linen? Tzitzit. Right? When do you put it on? All these details are not written in the Torah Shebechtav. The written Torah does not have the details. It's only the Torah Shebal Peh. There's more Torah Shebal Peh than Torah Shebechtav. More oral than there is written. All the Gemarot and Mishnayot is Torah Shebal Peh. The Midrashim, the Zohar. I'll give you a quick example of how you can't be without Torah Shebal Peh. The Torah says, Hashem commands that I'm going to give you the Luchot HaEven, the Torah and the Mitzvah. Torah, all kinds of details specifying what I'm giving you. Not just the tablets, the Torah, the Mitzvah. In other words, there's a lot more information. And he says, Sima befihem, put it into their mouth. In other words, let them learn it, let them memorize it. It's not just write it, Let them memorize. So there's a great deal of Torah being memorized. That's what's called Baal Peh. It's oral. And you have to have a very strong tradition of it, otherwise things don't make sense. Because if you look at the Torah, you open it up, there are no vowels. When it comes to a woman who's a nidah, it says v'tame'ah, she will be unclean after giving birth. In example of after giving birth, it says Shin Bet Ayin Yud Mem. Shin Bet Ayin Yud Mem. How do you read that? You can read it 70, Shiv'im, or if you have the Masoret, you will read it as Shevu'aim, 2 weeks. How do you know which one it is? 70 and 2 weeks is a big difference. 70 days? But that's what it says. Shin Bet Ayin Yud Mem, Shiv'im. If you read an Israeli newspaper today, if it says that, you can say Shiv'im. Obviously, if you read the whole context, you may be able to figure it out. But here we're learning a new law. She will be unclean for 2 weeks, or is it 70 days? Shevu'aim, right, versus Shiv'im. Same letters, just the vowels are different. Without the Torah Shebal Peh, we would not know. Another one, Lo tevashel gdi b'chalev imo. You all probably heard about this one. How do we know you cannot eat meat with dairy? It says, do not cook a gdi, a young calf, goat, b'chalev imo, in its mother's milk. Right? Who says it says chalev? Maybe it says chalev, in its fat. Chalev is fat.
This is the Muslims say, right?
Chalav, no, it depends how you read it. Chalav is milk. How do you read it? Depending on which vowels you put there. Completely different word. So is it b'chalev or b'chelev imo? You have to have a masoret, you have to have a tradition. Without it, you don't know. Lo yalin chelev hagi ad boker is another pasuk. Chelev or chalav. Which one is it? Right? The sacrifice cannot stay till the next day. Same letters. Chalav or chelev. How do you make Brit Milah? You do it in the heart? How do you know you do it there? In the Milah? Doesn't say. How do you know Brit Milah doche Shabbat? If a child is born on Shabbat, if it's on time, you do it on Shabbat. Shabbat? Can you do Brit Milah on Shabbat? You can't do cut, take out blood on Shabbat. We have to know that the Torah tells us. Where does the Torah tell us you can do it on Shabbat? Mitzvat Milah docha, it pushes off Shabbat. If he was born on Shabbat, if it was not a cesarean, by the way, it has to be a natural birth on Shabbat. If he's born any other day, you can't do it on Shabbat, even though it's comfortable for you. Only if he was born on Shabbat can you do it on Shabbat. How do you know this? Torah Shebal Peh. The Chachamim received that information from Moshe all the way from Sinai, all the details of the halakha. Yes, you were going to ask something?
Yeah, I was going to say that it also word is Ola. And Ola can also be referred to the earlobe. So how do we know that it's not the ear from the Torah thing?
Orla, you mean? Orla?
Oh, yeah. That's right.
Not Ola. Orla.
The Orla, yeah.
Right, Orla, there's Orla in the 3 years with the trees.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's an Orla there. Same thing. Yeah, Orla. You have to remove the Orla. Which Orla? There's Orla in the heart too, by the way. The Torah says remove the heart,
Yeah, exactly.
Orla. Circumcise your heart. Well, maybe that's what I need to do on the 8th day too.
And
Yeah.
also, how do you check an animal? It says clearly how I showed you on the mountain. So what do you mean
Right.
how I showed you?
That's exactly-
Give me examples. How I showed you.
That's another example. Shechita, terefot. How do you make proper shechita? How do you cut the animal? How do you slaughter it? Which ones are terefot? Which one disqualifies it from being kosher? How about Shabbat? This is a very important one. Shabbat says lo ta'aseh kol melacha. Don't do any melacha. Does anybody here know what melacha is?
Creation.
What's a melacha? Work? So what's the word avodah mean?
Service.
Yeah, you go to Israel, we talk about work, they say avodah. The Hebrew word for work, physical work, is avodah. Melacha is a creative work. Anything that's creative, to paint, right, is a creative kind of work. To write, it's a work, but it's creative. Anything that was in the Mishkan, that was intended to create something, to form something, was called a melacha. So we can't do those things. You can do physical labor on Shabbat. You can move this table across the room. You know that? Even if it weighs a lot, that's avodah. But you can't carry your keys or a handkerchief outside in the street on Shabbat if there's no eruv. All it is a handkerchief and the key. It doesn't weigh so much. There's no avodah, but it's a melacha. So there's certain melachot which are not hard. They're very easy. It has nothing to do with easy or hard. It has to do with being in melacha that the Torah forbids. The Torah wants us to experience Shabbat properly. Lo ta'aseh kol melacha. Abstain from that which you do during the week. Which ones? 39 categories of them. They're all in the Midrash. They're all in the Torah Shebal Peh. They all were in the Mishkan. The Gemara speaks about it. The Gemara gets into detail. And after that, we have, of course, many halachot written in the Shulchan Aruch that elaborate a little bit more for us who don't know all the situations and various circumstances where something may be a problem. Then we have, of course, Sod HaIbur, and the entire Jewish calendar is an incredible thing. Jewish calendar, that it reconciles the moon and the sun in such an accurate way that the Goyim don't have. Nobody has such an accurate calendar the way the Jews have. And the entire secret of it is Torah Shebal Peh, that was handed down it was only handed down to very few people. Not everybody was familiar with what's called the Sod HaIbur. You know, the leap years and all the changes of which month is a full, which month is not a full month. All of that is Torah Shebal Peh. But let me just finish with one final question. Since we spoke about how we cannot have Torah Shebal without Torah Shebal Peh, why wasn't the Torah Shebal Peh written down?
Amen.
Flexibility maybe, so that it can be adaptable to the people and their needs.
Why shouldn't they have written down the Torah Shebal Peh?
Because like they want it to be living, like people should talk about it to be a living Torah.
Let me tell you, yes, go ahead.
It's because there was a fear that it would become lost, and so they had no choice but to write it down.
No. The question is, why didn't they write down the oral Torah?
Oh, because
The rest of the Torah Shebal is written.
because there was no need to write it down.
No need.
Someone would know it by heart, and then he.
Do you know it by heart? I don't know it all.
I
by
don't,
heart.
but
I don't
someone
either.
back then, and there's a lot more to it than what is now known as the Talmud. This is just one of 70.
Yeah, but why shouldn't they write it down? What's the problem? They weren't allowed to write it down, actually. Who's the first one to write down the Torah Shebal Peh? Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi.
You're the prince, yeah.
Wrote on the Mishnayot. The time came to write it down. Why did the time come then to write it down, not before? There are various explanations that are possible. One of them, first of all, there are many secrets in the Torah Shebal Peh, especially in the Kabbalah. That's not intended for everyone. So because of the secrets they didn't write down. The Kabbalah was not written down. It was called Kabbalah handed down, given over. You have many complex areas of the Torah that you cannot write down. You cannot just write down all the details. So it had to be taught. It had to be taught and learned. And based on certain rules, you would use your judgment that you would apply in certain situations. Had you written it down, it would be subject to interpretation. Many times, something that is written down, text, is subject to interpretation. So it was better preserved orally than written because of the many details. Why did they write it down eventually? Because Et Lasot Lashem, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi noticed that people were forgetting. People were about to be going all over the world. The diaspora, the Jewish people are about to be exiled. There's not going to be a continuous tradition, Chaz v'Shalom. There may be a break. He wrote everything down as much as he can. Another reason? Anybody know? What's this Friday? What's this Friday? What happened on Asara B'Tevet? One of the things that happened. Why do we fast?
Destruction of the temple.
No, the destruction of the temple is Tisha
No, I
B'Av.
know, but it was like the
Beginning.
the siege.
It was the beginning of the siege. That's part of it. What's another thing that happened? There are several things that happened on Asara B'Tevet. One of them was that in this time, at least around that time, the Torah was translated into many, many tongues, many languages. Talmai Melech forced the Jews, the elders, the Chachamim, to translate first into Greek, then into other languages. There was a big miracle that all the translations came out exactly the same. They all knew exactly how to translate, even the difficult passages, difficult words, and difficult concepts. So that was the good news, that it all came out right. But what was so bad? Rabbis tell us that darkness came onto the world. Darkness befell the world. the moment the Torah was translated, because you cannot fully translate it right. You cannot perfectly. You do not do a good job. The Torah cannot be easily translated to other tongues. And besides that, once you've translated to other languages, you've allowed Goyim access to our Torah. And what have they done with our Torah? They've misinterpreted intentionally and said all kinds of things using our Torah. Once the Torah was accessible to the Goyim, it caused problems. It was not such a good thing therefore, that's an additional reason why at least the Torah Sheba'al Peh was not written down right away. Let them not touch that. Another reason, should they ever decree against us to cancel, to annul mitzvot like the Greeks did, they won't be able to touch that which is not written down. The Torah Sheba'al Peh will remain with us. They may take this away from us. They may destroy this from us. The Torah Sheba'al Peh will always remain with us. An additional reason why the Torah did not want us to write our secrets down. This is our heritage. Right? Let the Goyim Chazrum not tap, not touch, not contaminate this. The Torah itself, unfortunately, became accessible, and that was already a day of mourning. Asara B'Tevet, one of the reasons we mourn. Yes.
But Moshe Rabbeinu and Yehoshua both translated into all 70 languages. They wrote it on the...
But that's just the basics, not just the basics, not the whole Torah.
But did they write the whole written Torah?
No, also not. According to our tradition, it was just the basics, not the whole Torah. It's a good question, a good point that you said, that they translated it, but it was just the basic, the fundamentals of the Torah.
Then why do we continue to translate into English and different languages?
Because American Jews don't speak another language, unfortunately. It used to be in the past that Jews spoke their own language between them, whether it was Yiddish or something else. Today, many countries, there's no other language for the Jew except for the language of the country. So they learn Hebrew as a second language instead of being it the other way around. But anyway, as soon as Mashiach comes, we're going to go back to having one language. In the meantime, people have to have access to the Torah in any way possible. Today, Baruch Hashem, there's internet. You can listen to thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands, right? How many do you have on your site?
I have myself on my website over 100,000.
Lectures, and it's in English. That's besides Hebrew, Spanish, French, Portuguese, other languages that there are on the internet. You know how much Baruch Hashem Torah there is today in the internet? So today you have to make this accessible to as many Jews as possible. We have no choice. Et lasot Hashem. And we have to give it to their in their language of choice. Yes.
I'm also thinking, if we were a light unto the nations, there's our mission, one of our mission statements is to be a light unto the nations. So we want them to learn at least the good Torah, the right Torah from us, rather than
the 7 Noahide laws. That was our only obligation, to teach them, to teach them 7 Noahide laws, not our entire Torah. It's a sur for a Jew to teach Sodot HaTorah for a non-Jew. It's a sur. It's prohibited for a Jew to teach Kabbalah to a non-Jew, the deep secrets of the Kabbalah, not the simple things. The deep secrets, it's a sur for us. So we have to be careful what we teach and what we do not teach.
Well, that Kabbalah Center is doing a good business over there on Harvard.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, but not reliable.
Yeah. Anyway, Moshe Rabbeinu, before he passes away, what does he do? He writes 13 Sifrei Torah. One that remained inside the ark, together with the Luchot Abrit and the Shivrei Luchot, the broken Luchot. They're right now sitting underneath the Temple Mount. Mashiach, it's one of the first things Mashiach does when he comes. I don't know if it's the very first day or whenever, is to remove the ark from the place where it is hidden now, in one of the caverns, subterranean caverns underneath the Temple Mount. According to the tradition, the Gemara says, that's the most accurate tradition, that's where it is. So in that ark, you have Luchot Abrit, Shivrei Luchot, you have one Sefer Torah supposedly, you have Tzinczenet Haman, the souvenir of the man, in a jar, a souvenir of the man, still fresh, probably. Yeah. Shemen HaMishcha, a flask of the oil that was used to anoint the kings and the priests, right? And you have the staff of Aharon. Plus you have a few other items there. All of this Moshe is going to remove. So he wrote 13, one that is in the ark, and 12, each one of the tribes received one.
That's where the Kodesh HaKodashim is today, or where the Kodesh HaKodashim?
It's in there, that area, yeah. So what do you have? You have Sifrei Torah that are given, that of course did not last forever because it's parchment. But ever since, the way Sifrei Torah were written was to copy from an original. And that is why all the Sifrei Torah today because people, the Sofrim were very, very careful that even if one letter is missing, it's Pasul. For the most part, all the Sifrei Torah that are kosher, of course, are pretty much the same. There have been some differences between the Yemenite Sifrei Torah, but they're very minor differences, and the rest of the Sifrei Torah. But whether you're Sephardic or Ashkenazi, it's basically the same Sefer Torah. So the fact that the Sefer Torah, the Torah of Am Yisrael, has stayed intact throughout all the history in itself is an incredible feat. Because books, as soon as you copy, you do it, there's always mistakes. This has been the same Sefer Torah that has kept us alive, and that the reason why it has kept us alive is because we kept it alive. And that is the meaning behind the message that Moshe Rabbeinu calls upon us to recall at all times, is that the Torah that we have, Torah Tzivanu Moshe, Morasha Keilat Yaakov, it's the heritage of all of us. It belongs to every one of us, and that is why we need to share it. We need to teach it to those who don't have it. Many Jews don't have it, unfortunately, didn't grow up with it. So it's our obligation. If you know a little bit more than your neighbor, than your friend, than your relative, you have an obligation. We're all responsible to teach, to bring them to a class, to give them a tape, to show them an internet site even. And if he gets interested and becomes more learned, then you have a tremendous mitzvah. So that is our responsibility. The only way it could survive, and the only way it could have a good positive effect in rekindling the hearts of many, many Jewish souls, is because it is divine. As we said in the very beginning, our neshama is divine, the Torah is divine. When the two come together, you have a tremendous flame. Thank you.
Ken has himself over 1,000 lectures on my website at EnglishTorahTapes.com.